Sometimes we just crave a little bit of mischief. As the most mischievous member of the Dicebreaker team, it falls to me to fill you in on how you can have a fun-filled evening of lying to your pals in a completely socially acceptable way. Social Deduction Games ask their players to conceal the truth, root out liars, and take on roles with as much commitment as your local theatre group. By the way, if you love social deduction games, but you can't find a big enough group to play them with, then don't fret. This list includes not only games for between 5 and 11 players, but also social deduction games for just 2 players. How does that even work? Well, keep watching to find out. Also, if you like this kind of video, make sure to like, subscribe, and check out more of our videos to let YouTube know that we're a pretty good channel. We're super close to 100k subscribers and we need your help to get there. We really do. Now, on with the list. One day I will amass enough players for a full game of Feed the Kraken and it will be glorious. Players in Feed the Kraken take on a hidden role under 3 distinct factions: pirates, sailors, and cultists. The sailors simply want to reach safe harbour, unload their cargo, and probably celebrate with a pint or 2. Meanwhile, the pirates look to steer the vessel known as the Instabil towards their secret brigandine cove for, no doubt, nefarious purposes. Cultists must work in secret to undermine both other factions as they navigate the crew of the could-be sacrifices towards their Kraken god, hidden beneath the waves. Survival means navigating the vessel through waters both dangerous and unpredictable, so players will need to work together through random events encountered during their journey. Additionally, eliminations will only take place towards the end of each 45 to 90-minute game. All hands are needed on deck, even if you might suspect traitors amidst the crew. Instead, your job will be to convince everyone else to chart the course that best suits your goals, or else raise through the ranks and call your own shots. Of course, every ship needs a captain, lieutenant, and a navigator, but what if you suspect them of wrongdoing, or you just want one of those roles for yourself? Well, then it be time for mutiny, says I. Sorry. By revealing guns which tally up as votes, you can make sure the current captain is deposed with someone new taking their stead. It's a secret whose side you're on, but you also have a sub-secret, a character card, with a special action you can choose to use, usually just once in the whole game. This can range from the Peacemaker, who can choose a player to return their revealed guns to their supply, discounting them from the mutiny total. The Troublemaker, who doubles the number of guns someone has just voted with. Or the Mentor, who can turn one player's character card face down after it's been used, allowing them to use it again. And there are many, many more. This game has all the elements we know and love from our favourite social deduction games. Voting, rotating leader roles, and the deluxe edition has the cutest components I've ever seen. Look at this little wheel. Look at it. Wow. They all laughed when I brought this back from Essen Spiel in a tiny little suitcase. But who's laughing now? The channel we have spoken about Magic the Gathering ad nauseum due to our header video, Michael Wheels Whelan's burgeoning interest in the game. He's right though, the game does slap, especially the Commander variant, which you can watch a video of right now by clicking on the pop-up in the corner. We have one more pitch if you weren't completely convinced by us hyping up the game. There's the Hidden Role variant. In Magic the Gathering Kingdoms, 5 to 6 players are each given a land card at the start of the game to give them their role. Plains is the king or queen. I would refer to them as the gender-neutral monarch, but that's already a thing in Magic the Gathering. Forest is the knight, mountains are bandits, swamp is the assassin, and if you're playing with 6 people, island is the usurper. In this game variant, you do not reveal your role until the very end of the game, and each role has their own objective. The king or queen starts with a bonus of 25% extra life, with the goal of being the last one standing. They are the only player who reveals their role, which is done before the first round of play. The knight must keep their king or queen alive by any means necessary, even if that means going down themselves. As long as their ruler survives, they win. The bandits are a team of 2 players who want the king or queen to die, plain and simple. As long as their death is not brought about by an assassin or a usurper, they win. The assassin is a more difficult role, but certainly a lot of fun. They must be the last one alive, outliving the rest of the players who are allied in their separate pursuits. And the 6-player version includes the usurper who wants to become the king or queen. If they deliver the killing blow to the king or queen, they reveal their role. But in a fun twist, the previous ruler doesn't outright die. They are reduced to a single point of health and play on, now taking up the role of the usurper. This game mode shows just how flexible Magic the Gathering can be, and it really adds a level of drama to an already dramatic game. We would recommend giving it a shot. Here at Dicebreaker, we believe in board games for everyone. Adults, kids, grandparents, everyone. That means that we have included a game on this list that, at first glance, looks like having a cutesy little game of mice sleeping and having a good time. But in actuality, there's a sneaky little cheese thief who wakes up in the middle of the night and stabs us all in our furry little backs, stealing our only source of food and leaving the rest of us destitute. I know it was you, Grandma. Where have you stashed the cheese, Grandma? Cheese Thief is a delightful alternative to Werewolf, which is way softer and gentler than the big bad wolf coming to your door and mauling you when the night falls. In the middle of the setup is a little foam piece of cheese, and as tempting as it is, you cannot eat it for real. The cheese stays in the middle of the players until each of you wakes up at a predetermined time during the night. How do you know what time to wake up? Well, it's under your little tree bark cup, of course. You roll your dice under the cup, a la Liar's Dice, and then peek under the cup to see what time you'll be waking up that night. A 1 on the dice means 1 a.m., 2 on the dice means 2 a.m., etc. And you must wake up at that time. This is part of what makes the game so interesting and entertaining. Maybe you wake up at 2 a.m. and all is well, leaving you with no information. Maybe you wake up at 5 a.m. and the cheese is gone! What if you wake up at 3 a.m. and you see the cheese thief in action? Well, what can you do? You're a witness, you're in this together now. You become the cheese thief's follower and you do all you can to help them get away with it. There's a fun variant you can play within the game, playing as the full mouse who wants people to think that they're the cheese thief. If you're feeling werewolf but don't want to describe people being ripped limb from limb in the dead of night, this is a lovely alternative. We of course had our own fun with creative ways of narrating the action.
Ah, what a lovely sleep everyone is having. The clock ticks and tocks once again, and the hour strikes 2! 2 in the morning. The tired little mouse opens their eyes.
Ooh, it's very quiet. We should shuffle around a little bit, maybe.
Scatting mice.
Oh no! And now another huge game for a huge amount of people. Thankfully, there are social deduction games for smaller groups on this list, so don't worry. Blood on the Clocktower is a social deduction game that has had quite the presence at most gaming conventions and board game cafes around the world for several years now. If you've ever noticed a circle of about 15 chairs at a convention, with a person in the center holding a rather large tome, there's a good chance it was the team of Blood on the Clocktower. Publisher, Pandemonium Institute, weaving their storytelling magic for excited punters around the globe. Much like other social deduction games, your roles throughout the game are secret, each with their own special abilities that can either aid or hinder your team to victory. Set in the quiet town of Ravenswood Bluff, every player has a role to play, from the washerwoman to the village drunk to the mayor. But there is also a demon among you, a demon who will kill one of your villagers every night unless you catch them and put an end to their bloody tyranny. Blood on the Clocktower introduces several gameplay mechanics to make it stand out from the crowd, such as giving special importance to the person leading the game, known as the storyteller. As the storyteller, you are in possession of the Grimoire, the special game box that doubles up as a kind of seating chart for all the players and their special roles in the game. With this information to hand, you are able to shape the game to make it as interesting and dramatic as you choose. What information or misinformation you give your players is up to you at the end of the day. Their fate is in your hands. As well as giving special importance to the moderator of the game, Blood on the Clocktower also allows for latecomers and people who aren't sure they can stay an entire round to get involved through a special role called the Traveller that has its own special abilities, such as gifting extra votes to players, changing the seating chart, saving a life, or just outright shooting someone who's gotten on the wrong side of you. While everyone will know that you're the Traveller, they won't know which team you're on. The storyteller will make that decision for you. While player elimination is a regular occurrence, as it is in many social deduction games, Blood on the Clocktower allows dead characters to remain an intricate part of the game by still being allowed to be involved in discussions. Eliminated players even get a vote to use once for the rest of the game, meaning getting the dead on your good side can be vital to winning the game. Blood on the Clocktower is a thrilling experience which will either bring you and your friends closer or tear you apart. The Thing Infection at Outpost 31 was originally released in 2017 as the first tabletop release from pop culture studio Mondo, as part of a partnership with the Project Raygun division of licensed board game maker The Op. The movie board game retells the events of the 1982 film, as 4 to 8 players take on the roles of researchers stranded in the Antarctic with a deadly shape-shifting alien. The group of players must sweep the station, completing missions and ultimately escaping in the helicopter. Making things harder are hidden traitors, who can sabotage the humans' efforts to make it out alive by destroying rooms and impeding other actions if they remain undetected. Easily, the most terror-inducing aspect of The Thing is the tension that's felt between the remaining humans due to intense paranoia. With the ability to mimic whatever it assimilates, the alien is capable of masquerading as one of the Outpost's unfortunate staff members, at least until it feels threatened enough to fight back. This leads to some incredibly tense scenes in which the heroes interrogate one another to see whether they're actually who they say they are. Infection at Outpost 31 translates the tension via a gameplay mechanic called assimilation. Before the game starts, players are dealt a blood sample card, which they must secretly look at and place face down. At least one of these cards will be an imitation card, which indicates to the player that they are working as the alien against the others in the group. That was me in our playthrough, obviously. As the game progresses, player characters will be further exposed to the alien and have to redraw blood sample cards, which might turn them into a new imitation, thus mirroring the gradual assimilation of the characters in the film too. The opposing teams in Infection at Outpost 31 each have their own ways of winning the game, which specifically reflect the different tactics of the various characters in The Thing. Whilst the human players in the board game must successfully explore the 3 sectors of the research base before powering up the helicopter to escape, the imitation players have several different ways to achieve victory. Imitation players can attempt to raise the current game's contagion level to maximum by having the group fail their investigation checks on a room, or by having the group fail an encounter with the Thing. Alternatively, the imitation players can cause the outpost to be destroyed through smoke and fire tokens in rooms not being cleared. Finally, an imitation player can attempt to sneak aboard the helicopter through being voted into the escape team by the other players at the last minute. The dozen playable characters include familiar faces from the film, notably Kurt Russell's MacReady and Keith David's Childs, with the map providing a top-down view of the entire outpost. True to the paranoia of the movie, players can equip themselves with weapons such as a flamethrower and dynamite, and even tie up suspected imitations and test their blood as they try to weed out the alien horrors among them. If even a single imitation makes it onto the helicopter, the players, and humanity, lose. This is a game for horror buffs, but it's also a brilliant game in its own right, and we cannot recommend it enough. Next, we have another game that has several nods to a film, only this time it's less overt. Inhuman Conditions is a 2-player social deduction game which challenges the investigator player with identifying the robot hiding in plain sight. To do this, the investigator must interview the potential fake, all the while looking out for hints that they're not what they say they are. This game takes heavy influence from the 1982 classic Blade Runner, having you hunt down different kinds of robots disguised as humans. However, there are 2 classes of robot in the world. Patient robots will have a strange conversational quirk that you'll need to pick up on through the course of the interview. They're willing to wait the full 5 minutes on the timer and walk out as a freshly certified human. Violent robots, however, are looking to end the interview early by fulfilling 2 out of 3 of their objectives, at which point they can abruptly end the interview by murdering the investigator. Yikes. At the beginning of every interview, the investigator prepares and calibrates their device. Then a penalty is set. The penalty will activate when robots try to avoid detection in conversation. Should patient robots ignore their programming, they'll have to perform this penalty. Violent robots will be looking to do it on purpose to complete one of their objectives. Penalties are useful information, investigators. It's the only behavior you'll know to look for in advance, so you have to commit them to memory. Next, you have to record their name and background information for the record. Then you'll need to choose an interview module. Each one contains different question topics to help you get started. With that, you have 5 minutes to try and figure out if your subject is human or a robot impersonator. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, on both the investigator and the interviewee sides, you'll have your fair share of challenges. Investigator, is this just a human with a few quirks when they speak? Or is it a patient robot performing the penalty? Or a violent robot inching closer and closer to enacting your demise? Interviewee, you have to make sure you seem human and innocent, all while keeping up your randomly assigned persona. If you think you can handle the pressure, then why not give Inhuman Conditions a go? It's time for another big chunky game that you might need more than one table for. Unfathomable is basically a remaster of Battlestar Galactica, the board game released in 2008, only this time you're facing the deep ones instead of the Cylons. And obviously it's a big boat and not a giant spaceship. With Konechka having designed the original Battlestar Galactica game and worked on the Arkham Files games such as Eldritch Horror, you could be sure that this was going to be faithful to both sources. If you've played Eldritch Horror before, you might have played against Cthulhu and the Deep Ones, making every sea space virtually uninhabitable, due to the risk of bumping into the fishfolk and getting into an altercation with them. I see Unfathomable as a zoom in on those instances, taking on the sea beasts while using your own skills and just straight up magic to defeat them and allow you to get to shore alive. The gameplay takes place on a huge and beautifully designed board, which includes interactive dials to track your resources and places for all the game elements conveniently signposted, and areas of the board helpfully labeled. The object of the game is to play as one of the various crew members and passengers on board, who are diverse and offer an array of fun role-playing opportunities, each with their own special abilities that are essential to keeping the ship afloat. Along with that, 2 players are afforded the role of captain and keeper of the tome, respectively, depending on your character's position on a hierarchical list. Those roles keep things interesting in that they are given important tasks and decisions to make. Beware though, if your crewmates don't think you're doing a ship-shape job, they can throw you into the brig. Isn't that a bit extreme, you might be thinking? Well, it's completely justified when there may be a traitor in your midst. You could have guessed that. You know, this is a list about, yeah. With this hidden role mechanic, play is going to be unpredictable every game. Here are some things to know about Unfathomable's traitor gameplay. There is always a traitor. In some hidden role games, it may appear as though there's a traitor when in fact everyone is innocent, for example, Dead of Winter. In this game though, if there isn't a traitor at the start of the game, one will emerge halfway through the game in the awakening phase. Admittedly, this can throw a spanner in the works of someone who is just trying to be a team player up until that point. Also, everyone is equal. Everyone is given a certain amount of time to look at your role at the beginning of the game, and it is discouraged to outright accuse people and question them of their role. If you think someone is a traitor, in the brig they go. Simple as that. The traitor can reveal themselves as an action on their turn. They can just commit to being the traitor on their turn and run about causing havoc freely. It's so good. This takes away the frustration of knowing you've been found out, or having suspicion thrown at you no matter what you do. Just reveal as the traitor and give the other players one more thing to worry about. Along with that, you get to take part in the classic Arkham Files skill checks that we all know and love, and run away scared from the Deep Ones and their parents, Mother Hydra and Father Dagon. Also pronounced Daddy Dragon. It's an ideal game for a group of friends who fancy pointing fingers at one another for an evening. There really is nothing better. Deception Murder in Hong Kong allows each of the players to step into their role of investigator by giving them the tools to hunt down the killer in amongst a bunch of innocents. Well, mostly innocents. At the start of the game, each player is assigned several Cluedo-like means of murder cards and clue cards. Before the secretly selected murderer picks one of each to be the true answer. As well as the obvious roles of investigator and killer, there are other identities that must be taken up in this thrilling hidden role game too. The heart of the game lies in the roles everyone is given and how they are played. If you're randomly assigned the role of the forensic scientist, you are pretty much the game master for the round. They must do their best to lead the other investigators to the correct set of evidences laid out in front of everyone. But this isn't as simple as it seems, as they can't speak, point, or generally cast suspicion upon anyone directly. What's fun about this game is that, unlike other hidden role games, where if you're identified as the antagonist, you're pretty much out of the game before you can say your piece, deception allows the murderer to stay in the game, regardless of whether or not the other investigators know who they are. It all falls down to whether or not the investigators have found the murder weapon and key evidence. If there's no evidence, then the killer goes free. There are a few other roles that you can only include if you have enough players: the witness and the accomplice. The witness starts the game with the knowledge of who the murderer is because, duh, they saw it happen. But what they don't know is how the murder was carried out. This may seem like a huge advantage, but if the killer discovers the witness because they were being just a bit too obvious, they can win the game by pointing them out at the end. We mentioned earlier that the rest of the players were mostly innocent. That's because there can sometimes be an accomplice to the killer. They know as much as the murderer does, and they can be a fantastic ally in throwing off the scent and figuring out the identity of the witness. Deception Murder in Hong Kong takes the best elements of the murder mystery board game and expands them to allow for brand new sleuthing opportunities for you and your fellow investigators. Another social deduction game that only requires 2 players. Mantis Falls is an odd, curious gem of a board game. It's a slick 2-player take on the social deduction of certified classics like Werewolf and The Resistance, crossed with the rich atmosphere of an art house mystery movie and card play that opens the window for the dramatic twists and turns of a weekly soap. Mantis Falls is a crime thriller set in the 1940s. As 2 witnesses to a crime, the rulebook leaves it as an ominous something that you weren't supposed to see, look to flee a town under mob rule. Well, you're told that the other person with you is another witness anyway. They could actually be the assassin sent to silence you before you escape. It's a thrilling setup, and one that Mantis Falls pulls off with an aplomb by twisting the classic hidden roles of Werewolf into a new form. In lieu of whittling down a bigger group to a few traitors known to lurk within, both players can be innocent witnesses, or one could be an assassin. Or they might not. With 3, possible via an included rules variant, the assassin is similarly not guaranteed to appear. There's always a chance of playing a fully cooperative game rather than engaging in a competitive fight to survive, but you have no way of knowing for sure. Assuming the best and letting down your guard is a quick way to find yourself at a loss. Primed for suspicion, witness players must spend the game trying to work out whether their companion is about to sink a knife into their back, or whether they risk eliminating someone who was genuinely on their side. The lone assassin, meanwhile, must avoid scrutiny until the time is right to strike, or risk losing their target into the dark night. Rather than working things out through pure discussion, Mantis Falls puts an explosive card game at its center. Each turn, the 2 players both have the chance to play a series of action cards from their hands. There's a light bit of combo potential, with cards in a matching suit able to be strung into a series of actions. These abilities can be used to hurry along the road to freedom, call in helpful allies, and more. Most of the time, though, you'll be using them to fend off enemies that put you in their sights. The players must work their way out of town along a dark road, dealing with the threats they encounter along the way, which may or may not include their own companion. Harm doesn't always come from your would-be assassin. Event cards are drawn at the start of each round, which throw up various hurdles along your escape path. Some of these are incidents like storms and earthquakes that can only be mitigated rather than avoided. We came away from Mantis Falls excited to share it with as many people as possible. It has the feeling of a cult series of television like The Kingdom or Twin Peaks, in its refreshing originality and willingness to play around with the conventions of an established familiar format. We can't wait to see what other moments of tension, delight, and shock emerge from its loaded gun of a premise. Our final choice for this list is an oldie but a goodie. Hailing from the heady days of 2010, The Resistance is an absolute classic of social deduction. However, I'm about to talk about its Avalon variant, released a few years later, which gave both the theme and the gameplay a nice twist. Players are brave knights loyal to King Arthur and his cool table. Each turn, a group is sent out on a quest, but some of them are secretly traitors with the power to sabotage the mission. If 3 missions fail, the day is lost. New to Avalon is the powerful wizard Merlin, who can gaze into his crystal ball and learn the wrongdoers' identities, but loses the game if they correctly name him at the end. Avalon gets more complicated with additional characters. Percival knows who Merlin is, so that player can follow Merlin's advice and, more importantly, create false leads as to who is playing the famous wizard. Morgana, on the other hand, acts as a false Merlin. A Percival player will need to figure out who is who before trusting their actions. The Resistance Avalon is a devious game, arguably the social deduction genre at its purest. It's all about persuading your friends that you can deliver them a win, before immediately throwing that trust back in their faces. It is ruthless. While Avalon is superior to the original Resistance, the latter's Hidden Agenda expansion makes the two games functionally identical by adding the Commander, a reskinned Merlin. So it's really down to what floats your boat. Spies and bow ties, or grails and women in pawns. I know which one I'm choosing. And that was our list of 10 social deduction games that are not Werewolf. Were there any that you would have thrown in there? Let us know in the comments below. If you want more lists, but maybe you want them in written form, you can check out dicebreaker.com for lots of tabletop info from our fantastic editorial team. You can also sign up for a Dicebreaker membership on the website over on dicebreaker.com/subscribe. With that membership, you'll be able to get a bunch of discounts on merch, loads of deals to do with tabletop like Board Game Cafe discounts, and if you sign up for a yearly subscription, you get a free board game. It's a free board game. Also, we just launched a Discord where we hang out sometimes and other tabletop enthusiasts just like you can meet and chat. You can find an invite link in the description below. But most importantly, have a lovely day. Bye!